Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to talk about the DVT ActiveX controls in this session of our weekly online training classes. Just general information. My name is Eduardo Arces, and I am a distribution applied engineer here out of Duluth, Georgia, and I've been with the company for about 5 years. The only guidelines are you can ask any questions at any point. You can unmute your line. This is wrong. It's pressing *6, and then you press *6 again to mute it and unmute it back and forth. You can flag a question also through live meeting as well, and we'll try to keep it 50 minutes to an hour. What we're going to learn today is the common uses of the DVT ActiveX controls. There are 3 of them, and we're going to talk about each one individually with more focus on the DVT SID control is the most commonly used one. So we're going to talk about how to build a simple project. We'll talk about displaying, saving images, and some other functionality included in all those controls. For example, extracting data link information from a camera using that data link control, and some other functionality in the DVT manager control. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how to obtain more information as far as sample projects and documentation on how to use these controls. So, ActiveX controls. ActiveX is a COM technology. It's a Microsoft technology. And why do we have ActiveX controls instead of applications? Well, the advantages of having ActiveX controls and us as suppliers giving you ActiveX control rather than just canned applications is that ActiveX technology provides you with the ability of getting packaged components that you can then use in your application. In the application written any ActiveX control containers, any environment that is an ActiveX control container. And we're going to talk a little bit about environments that support ActiveX controls a little bit later on. ActiveX controls give you ultimate flexibility for programmers because you can design the user interface however you want to. So we just give you some components. In fact, a couple of the components can be invisible, so that you as a programmer provide the user interface, and we just give you some sort of an API to work with. ActiveX controls can be embedded in web pages and any other, again, development environment that support ActiveX controls, such as some HMIs, and we'll talk about that in more detail later on. The disadvantage is that applications are usually more controlled, so it's a little bit difficult sometimes to do error handling, for example. In fact, usually as creators of components or developers of components, you usually would send or propagate the error out to the program, to the application level, so that the application can handle errors however it wants, or however the programmer wants it to. So generally, in terms of error catching and so on, unless it's an error that is coming straight from within the ActiveX control programming environment or code, we don't catch or handle errors that are actually coming down from the application level, caught up in the ActiveX control, and handle there. Instead, we usually send it back out into the application level so that the programmer can handle that error or exception thrown however they want. when creating an ActiveX control, you need to think about how programmers would use controls. So we're constantly looking at what people need and whether it's user-friendly or not. And then you need to provide careful and extensive feedback to the programmer in terms of what's available and what the syntax is and so on, and what is happening internally sometimes as well. So again, it's a tough decision to figure out what functionality or property to expose. We want to make it easy to use, but flexible at the same time. So that's obviously a trade-off. And another disadvantage is that support is not always the same for all programming environments. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but I quickly say that the ActiveX controls, all three of them, were developed in Visual Basic 6. So again, ActiveX controls being a COM technology, Visual Basic being probably the most common programming environment in the industry today. .NET obviously is catching up, but as far as compared to C++ or Borland or some other environments, VB is probably the most common one. It's very easy to create user interfaces in Visual Basic as opposed to maybe C++. So they were built in VB6, so they generally behave better in VB6. Not only behavior, but syntax can change a little bit. For example, in the case of HMIs that provide their own GUI-like way of saving or including and embedding ActiveX controls in their pages. And also .NET environments, when they bring in ActiveX controls, they create wrappers around the controls that makes it a little bit more difficult to interoperate between COM and .NET, although Visual Studio 2005 is much better and are at that interoperability between COM and .NET. And but still, some of the syntax will be different when dealing most commonly with events. Some of the syntax might be a little bit different. So common uses of the DVT SID control, the most common use is just monitoring from a PC and eliminating the use of Intellect. You don't want to use Intellect or Framework as an operator interface. So besides SmartLink, the DVT SID ActiveX control is probably the second choice there. Rather than just using Intellect or Framework to just simply display images from the camera and display some information as well. You can obviously customize the user interface, and that's an advantage of using ActiveX control versus something like SmartLink. But of course, with SmartLink, you don't have to do any programming. So that's obviously an advantage to the SmartLink method of displaying or monitoring inspections. But there's more functionality as well from the DVT SID control. You can allow operators to start and stop inspection. So there is a lot of the functionality that's available in Intellect. General functionality, not very specific, and almost no setup functionalities is available except maybe switching products or job files on the camera side and that sort of thing. You can connect to many cameras via Ethernet, of course, and you can have multiple instances of the control on your application. So you can actually visualize images from different cameras at the same time if your real estate, if your space on the screen allows you to do that. So again, probably the most common use is just to display images and save them to disk. Product selection is another one of those common tasks that the DVT SID control provides. The other uses include getting some data, and that was starting with version 1.4 of the DVT SID control, not to be confused with version 1.4 of Intellect. Version 1.4, which has been out for quite some time, over a year, allows you to get smart link tables and display them on your user interface. So that's a way of extracting inspection data. We will look at how to do that later on as well, using DVT DL control or data link control as well. And as we mentioned before, the DVT SID, just like any other control, can be embedded on a web page, and that web page can also even be inside the camera using the web server functionality of the DVT cameras. There is other functionality. I mentioned already the smart link tables, and you can get some data from the camera, and we will look at this gathering data issue later on. And then you have the ability to set also an arbitrary size for the display, the image display on the image, using that display mode property. And there's an option to lock the aspect ratio. So as you change the size of the control, the aspect ratio doesn't change, so the image doesn't appear deformed. Also, you have an ability to re-inspect the currently displayed image. That's useful when you're mainly when you're in setup mode. But it may also be useful on I guess run mode if you're making changes on the fly to, let's say, certain sensor data, sensor information, or just exposure time or anything like that. You can call this function, say, through a button on your user interface, and it will try to re-inspect that current image. I take that back. If you make changes that pertain to how the image is acquired, you will need to actually trigger another acquisition. The re-inspect current image is for re-inspecting the image that was last acquired, or that is currently being displayed actually on the DVT SID control. So if you make changes to a sensor and you're displaying markings for those sensors, and you want to see what the impact was of those changes on that particular image, you can use this function, re-inspect current image. And then there is support for new marking options that was introduced back in Intellect 1.2. Those options are generated by the camera, and they include some of the layering markings and things like that. We won't get into too much detail there. So building a simple project is very simple. In fact, we also ship a few sample projects with the DVT SID control once you install it. And one of them is just simply displaying images and connecting to a camera and stopping and starting image feedback. So doing something as simple as that is very easy. This slide here is just showing you how to do that within the Visual Basic example. So you generally would have to somehow import components into your programming environment. This would be the way you would do it in Visual Basic. You can also right-click on your toolbox in the case of Visual Basic and add components to your toolbox. So the first thing you do is you include your control, or the DVT SID control, or any of the other controls into your project environment, and then you drop it into your graphical display, into your form. So that's how the DVT SID control will look like once it is in the VB toolbox. You can see it down here. And then to drop it, you just drag it like any other control into your form. And we'll look at an example of that later on. Saving images, like I said, is probably another common task that you can do with the DVT SID control. This is an example, again, using VB. Generally, you want to do that on any of the on-image events. There's 3 of them. The on-image with info is probably the most commonly used nowadays because it provides more data about the result of the inspection of that image, whether it passed or failed. So you can use the on-image with info event to save the image, and at that point you can append anything you want to the name of that file, which would be a bitmap file. And if you're using, again, the on-image with info event, you can get the result of the inspection, and you can even add that to the name of that file that you're creating. So here's, again, as a snippet, screenshot of what you would do in a VB environment, Visual Basic 6 environment, within, again, the on-image. The important thing here is using it on the on-image event, because a save image, what it does, it saves whatever image is currently being held at that moment internally by the ActiveX control, by that DVT SID control. And if you try to call this image at a point where an image is trying to get in, you may get either an older image, or we may be in the middle of swapping images from an old image to a new image into the new image buffer that's later displayed, and you may not get anything. So you want to call this function at a time where we know for certain that we have an image, and the best way to do that is doing it on the on-image event. The on-image event is an event that gets triggered whenever the DVT SID control displays an image. It has received the image, built up the bitmap, and displayed it on the screen. So at that point, we know for certain that we have an image. In this example, we're getting a static integer value. Static means that it will not go back to 0 every time you try to execute this function, because an event is a function. So static means that it'll keep this value even after you're already out of this function. So when you come back in, you just add 1. And this is just appending a counter, basically, to the file. All right. So we're going to hold off on the examples till the end, because what we're going to do is bring up an example that brings together all 3 ActiveX controls, and we can see how to use that. All right. So we talked earlier about how to get data from the camera. And one of the ways of doing that is using that on-image with info event, which has something like the result of the inspection, for example. It also contains other things like the image ID, which may not be very relevant to the inspection itself. But it's just something that you can use, for example, to create unique file names as you're saving images, just like we did in the previous example, except that we kept the counter on the VB side of things. But you can use that to extract result of inspection, that type of data. You can also use smart link tables. That's a new functionality in version 1.4 of the control. So for those of you who are familiar with Smart Link, there is a way. Smart Link is basically both hardware and software components that allow you to create a user interface without doing any programming. And to transfer data from the camera into SmartLink, we create tables in Intellect or framework, and that package table is sent over along with the image to SmartLink. Well, we added that functionality to the DVT SID control, so the control can actually receive SmartLink tables as well. So you need to use the get SL table function to basically start getting images, and then there is an event called SL tables ready, which similarly to the on image event, it provides you with a fresh new table. And the point here as well is that these two modes, because they're provided by the DVT SID control, these two methods of extracting data are synchronized with the images. So the data that you get in terms of inspection results, for example, through the on-image with info, or the data that you get within the SmartLink tables, that data is synchronized with that image that you're receiving at that point. So if you do something like on the on-image event, for example, save an image, and then on the SL tables ready event, you go, which is raised at closely the same time as the on-image with info events or any of the on-image events, you can gather data that is synchronized. Data in a table form and data in an image form, and then that data is synchronized. The disadvantage of that method, even though it sounds appealing, is that if you are really on a very your application is a high-speed application, you may not get every single image on the DVT SID control. So SID stands for Sampled Image Display, which is similar to the video display that you see in Intellect. And you know that as your inspection rate increases, then Intellect, or the camera actually is where the bottleneck is not going to be able to send out as many images or every single image, especially if because of the inspection times and the inspection rate, your inspections are very close to each other. You don't have a lot of time between inspections to do any sort of other processing. So if you're in that type of scenario, you will not get every single image. If that's the case, then you may miss some images and some data if you're doing it through the DVT SID control. Because I should say that SmartLink tables are always synchronized. They're not independent, so they're always synchronized with the image. That goes both ways. That means that yes, when you get the data, is synchronized with the image, but that means that if you don't get the image, you don't get the data either. There is a way that you can use the DVT DL control, which connects to the data link port through Ethernet on the to the camera, and because that is simply ASCII data, and because data link is guaranteed to go out of the camera, unless you're really taxing your computer is going to be able to also keep up with the camera. So you should be able to receive all the strings that is being sent over from the camera and received by the DVT DL control in a programming environment, in an application like any Visual Basic application or any operator interface that you're building. So you're more or less guaranteed, except in very few circumstances where you're just going extremely fast and your PC can't even handle it. But other than that, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get that data link information. If you're also displaying images, though, and you're going very fast, then you may not get every single image. So the data that you're getting through the DVT DL control and the images that you're receiving may not be synchronized, um, and you may end up with more um, data link information than images. So what you could do in that case is provide your own or create your own synchronization routine. The way you could do that is the onImage with info event includes um, the image ID, as I mentioned before, and you can also add that to the data link string. You can add that image ID. So in a way, you can use that image ID to synchronize it to the images you're getting from the DVT SID control and the ones you're getting from the DVT DL. That data, of course, can be saved and archived on the PC using any available functionality from any of the APIs, either Windows API or any other control that you have to do database access, for example, or using using any of those functions to save data into Excel or a comma separated value type file, etc. So again, other controls that are available, we mentioned already that DVT DL control, and there's also the DVT manager control. We'll look into those two next. So the DVT DL control is very simple. It's basically a wrapper around a socket connection. And it does provide 3 different display modes, either invisible, in which case you can use one of the events that get fired or raised every time the data link control receives data link information from the camera, and just you don't have to display it if you don't want to display the data and you just want to archive it or log it to a file on your computer or a database or an Excel spreadsheet or anything like that. You can do that and use the DVT DL control in invisible mode. There is also single line mode and multi-line mode. In multi-line mode, you have the latest information at the top, and it allows you to display a history, essentially, of data received through the control. So very simple code, actually, just a few lines of code to do with a DVT DL control, because basically it's a very simple control. It's just IP address, port numbers, and calling a connect function would do it. You don't have to actually react to any event if you're using one of the visible modes of displaying the control, either single line or multiple lines. You don't have to do anything else. And the DVT manager control is another control that allows you to do more network-related tasks. For example, browsing and discovering cameras in the network, or downloading firmware to a camera, or backing up and restoring system files or product files. So you could use this, for example, on an application where you have several cameras and you're trying to manage all these cameras and possibly create a maintenance routine where you have to maybe update firmware at some point, or just the fact that you can browse for cameras and you don't have to hard code the IP addresses of the cameras that you have in the network. It makes your application easier to deploy, more generic, because then people can just use something similar to the network neighborhood. This is very similar to the network neighborhood view of framework, and more compact than maybe the Network Explorer that's available in Intellect, which has much more features. But something like this will give you a quick way of generalizing your application, so the IP addresses of maybe a multi-camera system don't need They don't need to be hard-coded into your application. The control is invisible at runtime, so you have to provide the user interface. And it's basically just a series of functions, sort of an API that you can use to access all this functionality, such as browsing the network for the camera, setting the camera to diagnostics mode, could be part of your maintenance routine, etc. So again, the net browse protocol that's implemented in there, what does it allow you to do? It allows you to find all systems on the network, all DVT systems on the network. You can change the name, the IP address, subnet mask, etc. So you can change connection-related parameters of any of the cameras on the network that are discovered by the control. You can also, again, set the system to diagnostics mode and obtain information about systems, just like in the Network Explorer in Intellect or the Communications Explorer in the PC communications on Framework. So something like this, going back to this slide, you can see data for the particular camera that we have selected here. So other functionality of the control, you can, like as I said before, you can load firmware over Ethernet and restore and backup system files. This uses either Framework or actually Intellect's executable, and these are just 2 points about compatibility with older versions of Framework. The ability to back up system files was back in Framework 2.5, and restoring was started in Framework 2.6. So that's just compatibility issues there. You can also have functionality that are provided for systems that are password protected. So if you have different accounts, user accounts that are password protected, you can use some of these functions to log in basically when you do these particular functions, edit the system and loading firmware. So it's not a generic login functionality. It's just a way to include your username and password as you are performing these particular tasks. Editing the system, which basically changes IP address, subnet mask, and name. In this particular case, the restoring system file, the passwords are not encrypted. So if you're trying to send over data and you want to log in, notice that your usernames and passwords will not be encrypted. So anybody listening over that Ethernet conversation would be able to get at that information. There are other utility functions to obtain IP addresses and subnet masks for the network interfaces. So something similar to what's on the Intellect Network Explorer, where you can see the network interfaces, all the cards or wireless receivers on your PC. So that's just a way, something that you can use, for example, to detect whether the camera is or can communicate with your PC. Similar functionality is included in the Intellect Network Explorer, where you see some of the icons or the camera entry on that list appears in a different color or in a different format to indicate that the camera is either crashing or is not able to connect with your PC because of the differences and the incompatibilities between IP addresses of the camera and your PC. All right, so I'm going to go back to any questions at this point. Again, you can unmute with *6. All right. So what we're going to do is now show you some of the functionality that's available in a particular example. You can also look, and we'll talk about where you can get more documentation and help on how to use the controls. We didn't want to make this training session about the programming part because, again, the programming environment can change, but the functionality will pretty much stay the same. So I'll just quickly show you an example on Visual Basic, and you can go back and look over the samples that are included specifically with the DVT SID control that will allow you to kind of get your feet wet with functionality that's available there. So there's 3 different levels of complexity, if you will, that are displayed or looked at in the different examples that are included with the installation. And there's also a .NET example as well. So I'm going to try and share. Should be seeing a frame. Going to be adjusting that frame now so that you can see. You should be able to see Intellect. And I have an example here, something that's running on my camera. Just a simple application. And I'm going to bring over Visual Basic, VB6, Visual Studio 6.0. And this example shows different functionality of a few of the controls. Here's the DVT SID control. You can quickly look through help files here for the control. And this help file is the main source of documentation for the control. Here's some of the functionality that's available. And all the properties, methods, and events are documented with the control. Okay. We also include, in this case, this form browse form. Let me minimize this a little bit. Okay, there you go. Something similar to what used to be the PC communications control or dialog box in Framework, and something that we showed during the presentation. Here's a ActiveX control, the DVT Manager ActiveX control that allows you to browse the system. There are a few, very few properties that you may need to set at some point. The most important functionality, though, is the browsing of the network to discover cameras on that network, DVT cameras, that is. And this particular system includes, this particular example includes other functionalities such as setting the system into diagnostics mode and loading firmware and backing up and restoring, that is, downloading and uploading system files. And here's an example on backing up a system file. Basically, is a single function call to that ActiveX control. So if we run this application, this is what the application would look like initially. You can browse for systems, and for each system that's found on the network, you can look at the information that's available. So after you connect to the camera, you can view images. You can also show markings, something that we're not doing at this point. And the camera is in inspection mode at this point. And we're seeing the result of the inspection, the image ID as well. Any questions at this point? This was just to give you a taste. You can dial *6 again to unmute your line again. And this was just a way to give you a taste of what's available through the DVT SID control. Now, when you go back and install, by the way, these three controls are freely available for download on our web page. And once you install them, you can start looking through it. If we go back here, to our presentation. Help files, again, for all three DVT controls are the most thorough and up-to-date source of information for what's available for each control. All events, methods, and properties are explained in there, and with some syntax information and some sample code. It's probably snippets of code for the functionality available. So that's probably the first place to look into when you're trying to either debug something that you're not sure what's happening. Applications for the DVT ActiveX control, the DVT manager control, and the data link one. And there are also sample projects that you can use, such as one that's included, or all of these are included on the DVT SID control installation, and they include just a simple example that shows how to get images from the camera, hard coding the IP address, so there is no browsing capabilities in this example. And then an image saving example, communications one to get data link information and setting registered data, and a simple .NET example just to show some of the differences between VB6 and a .NET environment. In that case, was built with Microsoft Visual Studio .NET, and it is written in VB.NET. All right. So again, just to reiterate what's available, the three different controls. The most common one by far is the DVT SID, the most commonly used one, because it just provides the functionality that people need the most in terms of displaying images and doing certain simple operations such as selecting products or saving that image that gets through. And with a smart link table addition, then you can even get some data that's synchronized with the DVT SID control. And then with the other controls, you can also add some functionality and put together an application that is very scalable and generic enough that you don't have to hard code IP addresses and do things of that sort when you use something like the DVT manager to discover cameras on your network. You can also get, again, more real-time data through the DVT DL control as well. And again, in terms of programming environments, you can use it in any environment that support ActiveX controls, such as Visual Studio. You can use it C#, VB, or C++ or VB, and Borland Builder, and again, any other environment, even .NET environments. Even though ActiveX control there is usually a COM technology, or it's actually a COM technology, there is some support in the .NET Visual Studio environments. And some HMI products also give you the ability to either use VBA, which is a subset of Visual Basic, or they have their own GUI programming to add controls in there, so you don't have to write as much code. So there are processes or methods for you to embed ActiveX controls in some of those HMI products. And again, you can also embed ActiveX controls on web pages as well. So there's a wealth of environments where you can use controls. They're very, again, scalable, generic, and they can be used to create your own monitoring operating interface. Any questions in terms of functionality, things that you've tried before and you weren't able to do? Not sure how many of you have used ActiveX controls before, but if you have any questions, something that you have tried before, or functionality that that you may need, just let me know, either now or you can contact us here in Duluth, calling tech support, to let us know any feedback on things that you've tried that work, or things that you would like to be added to the controls, or just generic feedback. All right. So there's no more questions. We're gonna stop here, and again, this is in the last contact. If you have any questions about this or any other topics, you can always contact us here. And we'll see you next week for next online training topic, same time, same day of the week. All right, good afternoon, and I'll be around for a couple of minutes, take some questions, so if somebody has them.